as well as a Blazer ERA. At rank 6, we find two more tanks, influenced by the work of Israeli engineers. The South African Oliphant Mark 1A and the Swedish STRV-104. These modified Centurions are best used as snipers, as they take a long time reaching max and aren't particularly well protected. On the other hand, their quick reload, laser rangefinders, and powerful M1 SDS rounds make them extremely dangerous at long ranges. Naturally, both tanks are especially effective on big maps with hilly terrain like Sands of Sinai. The most modern vehicles of the series are found in the British and the Swedish tech trees. The STRV-105 isn't that different from the preceding model, but the Oliphant Mark II is basically a completely new design, which is only fair. Thanks to a new transmission and a new 1,050 horsepower engine, its mobility is almost on par with modern MBTs. The turret of the tank was reinforced with composite armor, improving its survivability, and sights for both gunner and commander were equipped with thermal imaging, making it very easy to search for targets. South African engineers basically breathed a second life into the vehicle, allowing it to reclaim its title of a true universal tank. Finally, there are quite a few Centurions that are event vehicles or premium vehicles. The British Action X and the Australian Mark V/1 are similar to the Mark III in the firepower department, but the latter has additional armor, while the Action X requires clever positioning, as it's best used when making full use of a hull-down position. The British and Swedish tech trees also include the premium STRV-81, which is equipped with Robot.52 first-generation ATGMs. The premium British AVRE, as well as the FV-4202, which is part of the regular tech tree, are very different from other vehicles of the series. The AVRE is armed with a short-barreled demolition gun that's not very effective at range, but is devastating up close. The FV-4202 is an experimental vehicle which was an amalgamation of the experience gleaned over years of developing Centurions. This is the slowest tank in the family, and it looks a bit like the Action X because of its new mantletless turret. Finally, in the British tech tree, there's also one more rare premium vehicle, the Schutt Caldelet, which is a modernized Centurion, like the STRV-104 or the early Oliphant. Centurions will have their uses in any combat conditions and on any battlefield. Thanks to their powerful cannons and decent armor, they will always be a reliable pick for an experienced tanker. And what do you think about this series of tanks? Tell us in the comments below. Hi, welcome to Thunder Show, where we showcase the most interesting, odd, and fun things that our players send to us. Today's episode may be titled in a straightforward way, "What on earth was that?" Get ready to be surprised by a fierce Mi-24, a Zis-30 SPG, 2 guests from the past, and an unlucky Jaguar with a nuke. Let's get started. A true communist isn't afraid of frontal attacks. They'd rather hand in their party card. The only thing left for Mi-24's pilot to do is pot shoot their rockets at the enemy Iroquois. Before being shipped in pieces to the hangar screen, the enemy manages to wreck the Soviet heli's rotor. And a couple seconds before hitting ground, our winner also manages to down a Cobra at a pretty great distance. You don't see this kind of chopper rocket action often. Here's your gold.
Velor on their Jaguar here is the Horseman of the Apocalypse, closing in on the battlefield. No way to stop them. They're almost celebrating. But wait, the enemy team has a nuke-carrying Jaguar too. The bombs are dropped almost at the same time. Now that's some adrenaline. It's almost decided. And the enemy Jaguar is late by basically a split second. Victory! Where's our nuke book? And here we have a ZIS-30 attacking across a ruined bridge. They're approaching the breach. Meanwhile, the unsuspecting M22 is hanging out below. The tank destroyer drops down and lands right onto the enemy, squashing it with its weight. 5,000 eagles for this leap of faith. Welcome to another episode of the Guests from the Past thriller series. Pepega Stale leads their duck to a modern battlefield. Here's a challenger carelessly ignoring the museum exhibit, coking up the skies, only to be swiftly sent to the hangar with a 75mm round. We always recommend choosing properly ranked vehicles for the battles, but this is a skillful shot indeed. In the gold. Now to some bombing news. An enemy Arado is aiming at a Bradley crawling below. One bomb away. Denied. What was that? Did they actually shoot the bomb mid-air with the autocannon? Well, whatever. The bomber goes for a second approach with another bomb, and we see another mid-air boom. This Bradley is better than actual SPAAs. And now it's time to reward the best works on Live War Thunder. This week's prize goes to Delta Akado, author of the Tank Maze Map. A genius idea. Can you find your way through? One more thing for today. We've seen multiple comments asking, will I get an email if my moment isn't featured on Thunder's show? Unfortunately, or fortunately, we can't send so many messages. Our team goes through a few thousand replays a week, and it'd be physically impossible. But we do read every email we get. Not a single one stays unopened. Looking forward to getting your replays. Bye. The shooting range. In this episode, pages of history. Soviet fighters' small ammo. Special, abandoned town in the mountains. And metal beasts, air superiority, the American way. Today, we're beginning to tell you about the new vehicles introduced by the Danger Zone update. And you're probably familiar with this metal beast. The first fourth-generation fighter and the latest member of the Grumman feline family, a famous actor, and a pretty hard-boiled aircraft. All of this is the top American carrier-based plane, the F-14A Tomcat. We often admire the shapes and grace of combat aircraft, but this machine feels like a different breed altogether. With its wings spread wide, the Tomcat looks like it just left the gym after a workout, straightened its back, and flexed its muscles, the tough steel muscles of an American plane. With the wings swept back, it's a swift, ruthless hunter, streamlined and whole like an arrowhead. Still, it's great in more than just the looks. The aircraft's power plant is 2 turbojet engines with afterburners. The space in the wing and the fuselage is occupied by fuel tanks. The nose cone hides the onboard radar station, and under the cockpit, we can see a 20mm autocannon with an ammo pool of 676 rounds. The plane's 8 hardpoints can carry bombs of various calibers, rockets, and guided with infrared and radar-guided homing devices. As per its design, the F-14 focuses on air combat. 2 powerful engines provide fairly good acceleration and climb rates, while its perfect aerodynamics and great structural integrity allow it to accelerate up to 1,500 kilometers per hour near the ground. Very few top fighters can boast this capability, and that feature dictates the optimal combat tactics for the Tomcat: energy fighting. The Tomcat's pretty good in dogfights too, but only at high speeds. It quickly loses energy if you try to turn to the enemy too quickly, making it an easy target. Which means you might want to try and stay away from the dangerous area in combat. The Tomcat can carry a hefty arsenal of air-to-air missiles to improve its chances, aided by a vigorous radar system capable of locating and tracking targets across the entire battlefield. For long-distance attacks, this American plane can carry the famous Phoenix missiles. Their engines work in eco mode to provide maximum flight distance. However, that also means the missile's dynamics are inferior to medium and short-range counterparts. The Phoenix missiles can't boast a high maneuverability either. After all, they were created to intercept heavy-laden bombers and cruise missiles, so basically any fighter can dodge them if they spot the approaching trail quickly enough. On the other hand, the AIM-54 has an obvious advantage: the combined homing system. For the majority of the flight, the missile tracks its target using the carrier plane's reflected radar. But sometime before the hit, it switches to its own radar, and the F-14 doesn't have to track it anymore. Still, the backbone of the Tomcat's firepower in War Thunder is composed of the familiar Sidewinder and Sparrow missiles. These are way more suitable for close combat. Here's what we believe is a perfect loadout: 2 Phoenix missiles in the back, under the fuselage, 2 AIM-7 in front of them, and IR-guided AIM-9 for the wing hardpoints. As a last resort, the Tomcat can also use its trusty old 20mm Vulcan, the quick-firing autocannon. The F-14 isn't that great at attacking ground vehicles, and outright bad if you compare it to versatile Phantoms. A few Zuni rockets and conventional bombs with calibers up to 2,000 pounds can destroy tanks, and there's even a ballistic computer to aid your aiming, but the Tomcat has nothing to fight enemy air defense with, which means it had better stay a pure air superiority fighter in mixed battles. We've seen a few comments asking, why did early Soviet fighters have such small ammo pools? Look at the American machines. Thousands of slugs for large caliber Brownings, or German ones with their gun pods and hundreds of Meningoschuss rounds. As it often happens, the answer to this question is much more complicated than it might seem at first. Those fighters' small ammo pools were a result of a whole range of factors. We can't even list them all, but we can try to group them and talk about the most influential ones. First, the fighters the Soviet Union had when it entered the war were vastly different from their original designs. The Yak-1 and Lag-3 had been designed to use powerful M106 engines. However, the Soviet industry failed to provide these motors or turbochargers for them by 1941. Take a look at the I-301, the Lag prototype. 4 machine guns, 2 of them large caliber, and a big 23mm engine cannon. Now here's the production Lag-3 with a Shvuk and a single machine gun. Quite a difference, right? The production Lag model had to lose a lot of its firepower, and the main reason for that was its M105 engine. It was weaker than the 106, but at least it was already mass-produced and in stock. A similar replacement happened to the I-26. Knowing how low the firepower of the first Yak-1 was, their designer Yakovlev had developed a wonderful I-30 fighter before the war. It was basically a Yak-1 remade in metal, lighter, and armed with no less than 3 Shvuk cannons and 2 synchronized machine guns. However, the start of the war, the need to evacuate the industries, and the shortage of Dural buried the plans to mass-produce them. And now we're approaching the second group of reasons. The extremely untimely beginning of the war, the evacuation and eventual loss of a major share of Soviet industries led to a noticeable shortage of rounds and aircraft ordnance. The Soviet fighters represented in blueprints and design papers were a sort of perfect image of those aircraft. In reality, the Yak and Lag planes could not have the Schwuck engine cannons and instead had to be assembled with, for instance, Berezin large caliber MGs. Even the later La-5 aircraft would sometimes only have a single Schwuck and a single large caliber MG. The Red Army Air Force only managed to solve the ammo shortage issues by the summer of 1943. Wouldn't you agree that large ammo pools weren't a priority? By the way, it wasn't even an issue either. Why? Well, here goes reason number 3 for the small ammo pools in Soviet aircraft. It has to do with the mindset of Soviet fighter pilots. Before being sent to battle, they were taught flying and firing techniques. They were taught not to be afraid of getting close and personal with the enemy, hitting them with raking fire, or as they'd say back then, hitting in the rivets, altitude, speed, maneuvers, fire, and would an enemy Messer or Focke-Wulf need much if each round hit it straight and true? No long, wasted volleys, only a single, quick, devastating blow. That's why Soviet pilots would often lighten their fighters, leaving the entire machine gun ammo on the ground and only loading the engine cannon. When the aircraft engineers had an experiment and installed the 37mm NS-37 cannons onto the Lags and the Yaks, the pilots almost cried for more of those planes. And they got them. First, the Lag 334, the Yak 737, and then the Yak 9T. The Airacobras with their 37mm cannons weren't as popular among the Allies, but the Soviet pilots loved them, unlike the Kitty Hawks, Mustangs, and Thunderbolts with their numerous Brownings. Did those large caliber guns come with a lot of ammo? No, not really. What they did come with was a great opportunity for the Soviet pilots to follow their favorite style, deliver a single devastating close-range hit, or take out some junkers with a sniper shot around a kilometer away. As is tradition, we're telling you about new locations in War Thunder after each update. And today's new location is the abandoned town. Let's start with its southern part. It's separated from the rest of the map by a small mountain stream. You can either ford it or cross it via one of the bridges. Winding asphalt roads go past 3-story buildings on one side and an industrial area on the other. Between them, on an intersection next to the main bridge and a small hill church, we can see Point A, the main combat area in the part of the map. A cableway is seen here connecting the mountain to the center of the town, and that's where we'll go next. Let's follow the main bridge past the recreation center. Here we can see the main part of the town stretching along the valley. Blocks of 3, 5, and 9-story buildings decorated with tile mosaics, wide and narrow streets piled with cars, colorful garages in the yards, small shops, and a cinema. All in all, it's a pretty regular small town. It does have some southern accent to it, though. Lush trees and bright green bushes are saying it loud and clear. Nature will soon retake everything humans have tried to create here. Here, in one of the central yards of the town, we can see Point B. It provides much more cover than the southern point. Thanks to a more sophisticated layout with irregular blocks in the southeast and a lack of straight streets in the northwest, you can reach it with no enemy encounters on the way, which means all kinds of vehicles will be fighting large-scale battles to control the center of the town. Moving on further north, past the overgrowing football field, we see the town border. This small, flat area, tightly squeezed by rocky slopes on all sides and full of small brick houses, is where Point C is found. The area seems pretty open, but that's a wrong impression. There's enough cover here. Only the most mobile tanks can quickly gain control over this area. They can sneak into this appendage to the main part of the town, hide behind the buildings, and wait out the capture. Then occupy a comfy position under the slope on the enemy side and meet the advancing enemy with a surprise flank attack. Still, even the hottest battles cannot destroy the charm of this place. The mountains are simply majestic. Their green slopes and snowy peaks are easy to spot even from the town, but the truly impressive view is found at a few kilometers above sea level. It's truly worth taking a minute to enjoy. Share your impressions of the new location in the comments. We'll be happy to read them. And now it's time to answer some of the questions you asked us commenting on our previous episodes. The first question was sent by a player called Takeo Nakazato. Is it true that there's an ultra-low quality setting? If so, how do I enable it? Hello, Takeo. The settings you need are found in Options, Graphics, Old Video Card Support. Capable Secret 4 asks, what's the best way to play T-55A? Hi there. The T-55A tactics depend on what enemies it encounters. This Soviet machine's armor can handle AP and capped rounds, allowing it to advance in the front. But it can't meet enemies armed with discarding sabot or high explosive rounds head-on. We recommend you use capped rounds as your main projectile on the T-55, while the APF SDS will do for the thickest targets. Another question comes from Hax Melper. Which aircraft can carry the heaviest bomb load? Hi, Hax. The Soviet Tu-4 strategic bomber is currently the one with the heaviest load, up to 12 tons of bombs. American Hat writes, on the German SF-40 barges, could a torpedo go under the middle section between the two pontoons, or would the hitboxes prevent that? Howdy! Exactly like in real life, a torpedo can easily go between the pontoons. Here, take a look. And the last comment for today was written by Kaka Kiri. Can we put an SPG, tank, or MBT on a battleship deck? Hi, Kiri. It's entirely possible since the deck would have enough space and even the heaviest tanks are super light compared to a ship. That's it for today. You've been watching The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment, and the next episode will premiere the following Sunday at 4 p.m. GMT or noon Eastern Time. Subscribe and click the bell if you don't want to miss our next videos. Don't forget to leave a like, share your thoughts and comments, don't attempt to pet a tomcat no matter how cute it looks, and see you next week. In the early 1930s, the French military decided to support the development of a new reconnaissance armored car for the French cavalry. They wanted a 4x4 vehicle with a 20mm gun that could reach a speed of 70 kilometers per hour and have a weight of around 4 tons. One of the companies that put forward a proposal was Panhard, a motor vehicle manufacturer with more than 40 years of experience under their belt. Engineers of the company managed to create a prototype that nailed the requirements almost perfectly, with one small exception. The vehicle was 2 times heavier than expected. Regardless, it had decent light armor, excellent cross-country mobility, impressive acceleration. The Panhard proposal was so appealing that the French military couldn't possibly just let it go to waste. And soon the experimental armored car was accepted into service as the Automitrailleuse de Découverte Modèle 1935, or simply the AMD 35. Despite the quick defeat of the French forces at the start of World War II, the new vehicle managed to impress quite a lot of people due to having nice armor, good mobility, and, with its 25mm gun, relatively high firepower all at the same time. Moreover, the Panhard armored car was reliable and easy to maintain. German units used it during Operation Barbarossa, and the French employed it in their colonies. After the war, an upgraded version of the AMD 35 was again taken into production by France. By that time, the French military had a completely new set of expectations for a reconnaissance vehicle. An armored car was expected not only to provide intel on enemy units, but also to directly support Allied units in offensive operations. That's why the succeeding design had to be more like a wheeled light tank, and not just a mobile reconnaissance platform. A huge step in that direction was made with the introduction of the Engin Blindé de Reconnaissance, more commonly known as the EBR. The work on the design started even before World War II, so engineers simply had to finesse and finalize it. The first and last swivel wheel pairs of the vehicle were used for driving on the road, and the 4 inner metal wheels were employed for better off-road performance. That wasn't the only curious thing about the EBR's mobility. Just like with the AMD 35, the armored car was designed to be operated by 2 drivers, one facing forward and the other backwards. And the max speed in both directions was the same, 105 kilometers per hour. It's important to say that much of that was possible thanks to the groundbreaking work of Louis de la Garde, an engineer who made major contributions to the development of the vehicle and also produced its engine. In 1951, the French introduced a variant of the EBR with a new FL-11 oscillating turret. It housed the SA-49 cannon, a 75mm gun which handled a lot like the American M6, which for a light armored car was definitely quite an achievement. With time, though, French engineers proved that they could go even further. In 1954, they fitted the EBR with an oscillating turret from the AMX-13 tank, a 75mm SA-50 cannon, and an autoloader, providing the vehicle with even more firepower. Despite its excellent performance, the Panhard EBR had one massive flaw. It was much harder to maintain than the older AMD 35. Due to the placement of the turret, mechanics had to remove it almost every time they had to do major repairs. As France was waging wars in its colonial territories, this design choice was a huge headache for the French military. To make up for it, Panhard created a new design based on the EBR, the Automitrailleuse Légère, or simply the AML. Unlike its older brother, this armored car was designed on a more traditional 4x4 chassis. It was much cheaper to produce, extremely easy to maintain, and also compatible with a lot of the EBR hardware. In the mid-1960s, both wheeled tanks received a big upgrade in the firepower department. They were fitted with a new 90mm DIFA cannon that fired Heat FS rounds capable of piercing the defenses of contemporary Soviet tanks, like the T-55 or the T-62. This excellent upgrade allowed the French to keep both the EBR and the AML in service for many more years. The last ever vehicles in the series were made in the late 1980s. The AML was especially popular. It was used by roughly half the countries on the African continent, and even made it to Israel. Nevertheless, in the early 1970s, the French government decided that their army needed a new armored vehicle with significantly more firepower. Panhard developed a prototype, but it wasn't picked due to a number of technical issues. In the end, the decision-makers went with the AMX-10. Its chassis allowed it to turn on the spot like a regular tracked vehicle, and its 105mm cannon meant that it had MBT-level firepower. The first ever AMX-10RC rolled off the factory floor in 1976, and vehicles of this series were in production up until the mid-1990s. They're still employed by the French Army, by the way, or at least their modernized variants. In the French tech tree, there's also an interesting wheeled tank destroyer called the VCAC Mephisto. VAB APC. This was a particularly successful design. Not only was it selected for mass production in France, but it was also exported to Lebanon, Morocco, and quite a few other countries. These days, French engineers are developing a new generation of armored vehicles. But if you want to have a go with combat vehicles that have already proved their worth in combat, well, many of them are already available in War Thunder. You can find them in the French tech tree, duh. Have we mentioned any of your favorites? Tell us in the comments below. Welcome to an experimental American light tank, a South African ATGM